It's International Fight Week, and UFC 303 is 5 days away, and it's time for me to give my breakdown and predictions for every single fight on this card. And even though the Conor McGregor fight fell off, I love this card. This is probably the third best card of the entire year. Every single fight on this card, except for one that's fluked its way to the main card, and that is Macy Chiasson versus Mario Bueno Silva. Every single fight other than that is awesome. And I'm just going to pretend that that doesn't exist. Listen. No one cares about that fight. Nobody cares. We shouldn't be having that fight on an International Fight Week main card. People are buying the pay-per-view. Shame on the matchmakers. I'm sick and tired of these. Oh my God, it honestly fucking pisses me off so much. The fact that that's even on the main card. There's so many other options that could have been on the main card. Either way, without further ado, let's get into these breakdowns. And as always, the timestamps are in the description if you want to hear a take of mine on a particular one of these fights. And let's get into it. The first fight of the night is Ricky Simón versus Vinicius Oliveira. Ricky Simón, I'm a little bit worried for Ricky Simón because he's on a downward spiral right now. He's coming off of a bad loss to Mario Batista where he kind of got outpointed and beat up and out-scrambled in that fight, outworked. And there was sort of this narrative about Ricky Simón by sort of painting him out to be this like super heavy pressure cardio monster. And I never saw it. He doesn't have crazy output. He's not spamming takedowns at the same rate as some of these other grapplers like Merab Dvalishvili. He's got a big, powerful blast double leg slam takedown, and he puts a lot of effort into it. Doesn't have the best submission game, doesn't have the best finishing, doesn't have the best control. And, you know, he's pretty basic on the feet. You know, you get 1-2s, you get big, strong leg kicks, a big overhand every once in a while. I never thought that Ricky Simón was as good as he was hyped up to be, and I'm not surprised that he's coming off of 2 losses. And Vinicius Oliveira is dangerous. Now, the thing about Vinicius Oliveira is, though, that he is incredibly overhyped as well. Vinicius Oliveira is sort of talked about by the hardcore fans as being this absolute monster, this guy that KOs everyone in his path. But this is a big step up in competition. Now, yes, when it comes to the trajectory of both of their careers, Ricky Simón is on a downward spiral, and he doesn't have momentum going into this fight. And Vinicius, this is a perfect time for him to fight someone like Ricky Simón, who might be a little bit unsure of himself going into this matchup. But Vinicius, who's known for his striking, he's not really known for his grappling. Even though he had a phenomenal flying knee KO earlier this year in his UFC debut, it's one of the sickest KOs I've ever seen. Even though he had that flying knee KO, he got taken down multiple times against Sopaj, I think that's his name, guy from Albania, and he was controlled for almost 5 minutes in that fight, taken down multiple times, and that was a guy that stepped in on short notice, I believe about 1 week's notice. And Ricky Simón's grappling, his wrestling, is a whole lot better than Vinicius Oliveira's last opponent. He's a whole lot stronger, he's got way more experience, and his cardio is going to be more solid, and I don't really think Vinicius Oliveira's performance was all that dominant outside of that third round. I mean, honestly, it could have gone either way, the first and second round of that fight. I'm not sold on Vinicius Oliveira yet. He does sort of get taken down with ease at times, and I'm going to bank on Ricky Simón taking a safe approach to this fight, going for big takedowns, looking for control time up against the fence and on the ground. And I think that he's got good enough striking to hang in there. I'm not sold on Vinicius Oliveira being like an elite level striker just yet. But I'm looking forward to this fight, and there's a chance that Vinicius could catch Ricky Simón. I just don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, I'm picking Ricky Simón by decision. Let's get on to the next one. Carlos Hernandez versus Rei Tsuruya, a really high-level, elite-level prospect out of Japan. Okay, following in Tatsuro Taida's footsteps, he's only 20 years old. Rei Tsuruya. Goodness gracious, I'm going to have to pronounce that name a little bit better. Rei Tsuruya. Okay, we're never getting it wrong ever again. I got it down. Carlos Hernandez has really good boxing, but he has a hole in his game, and it's blatant. And that is his submission defense. He got submitted by Alan Nascimento, who's a training partner of Charles Oliveira, who is a pretty decent grappler, but not a phenom by any means. And then, of course, we saw him get beat up on the ground by Tatsuro Taida. And I said going into that fight, Tatsuro Taida is going to have to win this fight on the ground against Carlos Hernandez, because going into that fight, Tatsudo had the most piss-poor looking striking, in my opinion. There was no speed on his punches. He looked very unsure of himself, but he improved drastically heading into that Carlos Hernandez fight and even finished him on the feet, knocked him out, which was really impressive. I do not think that Rei Tsuruya, I don't think he has better striking than Tatsudo Taira, but he's willing to take more risks, and he seems pretty confident in his striking when I see him throw punches. He's not got the best defense, which worries me a little bit because Carlos Hernandez does have solid boxing, but I saw Carlos Hernandez sort of freeze up a little bit in front of Tatsudo Taira, and I think that when the threat of the takedown is present, I think that's greatly going to hinder him in his fighting style. And I think that Rei Tsuruya will do all right on the feet. And I think his wrestling is solid enough to get Carlos Hernandez to the ground. And I think this guy has phenomenal ground and pound. I think he has really good submissions. He's undefeated. He's got a lot of momentum going into this fight. I think he's going to get this dub. And Japan's going to have another interesting prospect in the flyweight division. So I'm going to pick Rei Tsuruya by a ground and pound or submission finish in the second round. And I don't think Carlos Hernandez is going to let his hands go enough in order to win this fight. But let's get on to the next one. Now, this is a really fascinating one. Andrei Arlovski, crafty vet, coming off of a tough decision loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta. Before that, got knocked out by Dontel Mays. And he's in there against Martin Buday. Now, Martin Buday is kind of like, he's one of the big boppers of the heavyweight division. Some people consider him a blob. And he was on a 4-fight win streak before fighting Shamil Gaziev. And people are just going to sort of look at Martin Buday and think that he's just one of the heavyweights that's cryogenically frozen at the apex that sort of just gets reeled out on the conveyor belt for apex cards. But he's actually pretty good at imposing his will. Martin Buday puts pressure on people like it's no one's business. And let's not forget that he was on his way to earning his freedom against Shamil the Blob Gaziev. And yes, Shamil Gaziev sort of embarrassed himself because he didn't have any cardio in the Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight and sort of quit due to obesity. But at the end of the day, I mean, Shamil the Blob Gaziev was taking a big jump up in competition to face a top 10 guy who's been a staple in the top 10 of the heavyweight division for quite some time. I mean, I don't think it's a horrible loss for Martin Buday to have. I mean, Shamil Gaziev is a massive heavyweight. And Andrei Arlovski, I think he's going to be tricky for Martin Buday because the thing is, Martin Buday's style is very simple. He puts pressure on people and he marches them down. Now, yes, he doesn't have enough finishes in order to be considered a free heavyweight at this point. He still is fighting out of the apex, and he's going to have the battery pack in him. But he did have a nice Kimura in his fight against Josh Parisian. He took him down, beat the shit out of him up against the fence, and Kimura'd him. And he really just sort of wears on people and puts his weight on people in the clinch. And, he's a smotherer. And he's a massive guy. And Andrei Arlovski's in his 40s. He's lost his last 2 fights. Waldo Cortez Acosta is very fast and he is tricky. And I think that, that loss doesn't look too bad in hindsight for Andrei Arlovski because Waldo Cortez just but beat the shit out of Robelis de Spain, which was just incredibly impressive. So I could see Andrei Arlovski utilizing his head movement because he is one of the faster heavyweights, and he's a legit heavyweight. He's got some speed. He's got good head movement. He's hard to hit. I could see him winning this by a decision, but I just think that Martin Buday, a guy that was on the verge of earning his freedom in his last fight, because as we've said before, in order to earn your freedom as a heavyweight, you got to be able to beat the real people like Shamil Gaziev, now Andrei Arlovski, former UFC champion. You got to think he's going to be itching to get this win. And I think that there's a chance that we could see him pin Andrei Arlovski up against the fence and sort of just put a clinch fest on him and beat him up, sort of wear on him a little bit, maybe even get him down. I'm going to go with Martin Buday. I think that he's underrated. I think that he's got, honestly, a pretty good ability to just put tons of pressure on people and smother them. I don't think we're going to see a finish in this one. Don't be surprised if Andrei Arlovski can keep his back off the fence because he does have really good lateral movement and great head movement, and he's hard to touch. He's a little bit speedy, right? Bit of a speedy Gonzalez in that heavyweight division. I just think Martin Buday is a hungry man, and I think he's going to earn his freedom this time out. So I'm going to go with Martin Buday by a decision, putting a ton of pressure on him. And let's get on to the next one. Michelle Waterson Gomez versus Gillian Robertson. I am picking Gillian Robertson by submission. Okay, I'm pretty impressed with Gillian Robertson's ability to stand out in the strawweight division or just WMMA in general. She's one of the few fighters where I can look at it and I can say, wait a second, she's actually memorable because she has finishes. And you look at Michelle Waterson Gomez and, you know, people call her the karate hottie and she's like the soccer mom that's out here doing spinning kicks and all that. But, you know, she kind of reminds me of like a female version of Sage Northcutt that, you know, she's good for a UFC commercial, you know, one of those Toyota tire commercials with Forrest Griffin or, you know what I mean? She's pretty good at that. Like, she's the type of woman to be on like one of those commercials and, you know, she's there with Brian Ortega or something and she's doing like a high-yaw spinning kick up against the heavy bag. And she's really good when it comes to that, but I just don't think she's that good when it comes to fighting. I think she's pretty overrated, to be honest. They call her the karate hottie, and she's got some karate, but, I mean, let's be real. She lost to the tough cookie, what was her name? Lauren Murphy. And I fell asleep while watching this fight. She's just not dangerous. She's not dangerous. She's too friendly. And I think Gillian Robertson is going to be able to get her down, and I think she's going to be able to beat her up or submit her, because she can impose her will. Michelle Waterson, sure, she's got a couple of those karate kicks, but just nothing that's that impressive. Okay? Again, perfect for a Toyota Tires high-yaw kick in the heavy bag. Okay? And she's good for the UFC's Venom promotion where they're doing a collab with Venom and they're going to use her as a model. But I just don't think that she's going to be able to win this fight against a girl that is able to finish people. So let's get on to the next one. Payton Talbott versus Yanis Ghemmouri. I'm a little bit worried for Yanis Ghemmouri in this fight because I've seen a whole lot of nothing from this guy. And we saw Payton Talbott, of course, the real Sean O'Malley, walk down Cameron Simon and beat the fuck out of him without a care in the world. And we saw Payton Talbott do the same thing to Nick Aguirre. He got taken down in that fight, got controlled, but just ice in this guy's veins. He's never freaking out on the ground. His takedown defense is improving, and every single moment while Payton Talbott is on the feet, he's stalking his opponent down and trusting 100% in his training and in his combinations. And I think that's why we see this guy land with such impact and accuracy. Everything that Payton Talbott throws, he's fully committed to. He's trusting it. And I'm not saying he's putting 100% into his shots. It's actually, that's not the case. I just see that this guy's not second-guessing himself at all. And he's very calm in the octagon, and he's not worried about getting hit. And he knows that, dude, if I can put these strikes together, I have really solid timing. I can find the right shots to put this guy away. And we saw him just absolutely dominate Cameron Simon. And that's why we like to call him the real Sean O'Malley, because when Sean O'Malley burst onto the scene, he got the same hair, he had the same sort of finishing ability, just without all of the, you could say, you know, he's not really a threatening guy, right? Sean O'Malley is, you know, the wide-eyed battle droid on the feet. You punch him once and he's probably going to go into orbit. Payton Talbott's rooted to the ground. He's freaking planting his feet and he's marching people down. And he's brutally knocking them out. He's brutally piecing them up. Timing is awesome. Not that similar to O'Malley, to be honest. A much better version, to be honest. I would say he's the real O'Malley. Now, this is the issue with Yanis, because I think Payton Talbott's going to brutalize him, and I think he's going to KO him stiff. I think I'm going to pick him to win via a first-round knockout with a right hand, similar to that of the old O'Malley against Eddie Wineland. I think Payton Talbott's going to show us the real version of that KO. And the reason I'm picking that is because Yanis Ghemmouri, and he fought William Gomez. There is a little bit of a worry I have when it comes to, you know, he lost to William Gomez. He didn't look that good. But a lot of solid fighters lose to William Gomez. They don't look that good. They can't figure out his style. And then they bounce back and they really impress us because they're fighting people that are just sort of normal. William Gomez is a bit of a droid in the sense that, or he's a drone. And I made a whole video about different UFC styles, and I said drones are fighters that it's like you're playing a UFC game and you're playing against the highest level difficulty CPU, right? Where they do everything right, they have perfect accuracy, but they never take risks, and it's just really hard to knock them out. It's hard to look good against William Gomez. It's hard to have success against him. Payton Talbott's going to get right in Yanis Ghemmouri's face, and he's going to be stalking him down. He's going to be there to hit. I just think that when I went back and I watched Yanis Ghemmouri's old fights outside of the UFC, the reason why I'm so confident that Payton Talbott's going to destroy him, and that it's not just going to be the case where he looked bad against Gomez, but it'll look better here, is because he's doing the same shit in his other fights. This guy sits in the middle of the octagon. He has, most of his weight on his back foot. He's got his chin in the air. He's leaning back, and he's throwing lead kicks to the inside calf of his opponent off balance. And that's like his average strike. Every now and then you'll see him throw like a jab or whatever, but this guy is the epitome of an NPC on the feet, right? And you could watch his old fights. Go and look up Yanis Ghemmouri on YouTube. Watch his old fights. And you'll see from the first round, just look at any moment in the first round, watch it for a minute, and then zoom past to the third. He's in the exact same position, doing the exact same thing, which is hardly anything in that same position with his chin tilted in the air. Every single one of his fights, he's doing the same thing. In the center of the octagon, chin in the air. I don't know how these guys aren't knocking him out. I guess they're not good. They're not Payton Talbott. All right, these are other NPCs that he's probably fighting, but just a whole lot of nothing. Just no ability to impose his will. Low output, very predictable. Maybe Payton Talbott's going to bring him a style of fight to where he has to throw more, but I just think his chin is in the air and he sort of stands off balance a little bit. And I think Payton Talbott could catch him while he's throwing one of his lead kicks, and I think Payton's going to knock him out in the first round. Yanis also has an ability to mix in the takedowns, but he's not dominant enough on the ground for me to think that he's going to submit or finish Payton Talbott, who has been put in some bad positions, especially in his UFC debut. I think he had his back taken, but at the end of the day, I mean, he didn't freak out. He kept composed and figured out a way to get up as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to pick Payton Talbott to knock this dude out in the first round. I think he's going to have a viral finish, and this is really going to be the performance that blows this kid up, all right, as a massive star. So let's get on to the next one. Charles Jourdain versus Gene Silva. I love this matchup. Gene Silva is one of the most entertaining fighters in the featherweight division. Him and who's that other guy that I was talking about yesterday? Steve Garcia are two of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC. Super underrated. Gene Silva just knocked out a can, though. Wonder Boy's training partner that just got a win recently, literally forgetting his name, which goes to show how bad he is. Weston Wilson. Weston Wilson's like a string bean on the feet and literally get knocked out with a gust to win. And that's the thing. Gene Silva was barking in front of this guy, doing backflips in front of this guy, and just honestly, it was like beating up the easiest version of a CPU in UFC 4. No adversity coming in his direction. Charles Jourdain is a huge step up in competition from Weston Wilson, who just seems totally lost on the feet. Okay? Now, one thing that you could say is Gene Silva has a lot of power, and he's going to be marching down Charles Jourdain, who doesn't have a lot of power. So I think Gene Silva is going to have the ability to catch Charles Jourdain without having to fear the boxing coming back in his direction. The issue is Charles Jourdain has a really solid chin. I don't think he's been put away once in the UFC. And, Jourdain's really been disappointing me recently because he's had some lackluster performances, but there's no shame in losing to the Martian, Sean Woodson. I mean, Sean Woodson is like 6'3". He's got a 98-inch reach. He's impossible to get in on the inside of. And Charles Jourdain didn't really fight with a high IQ. He sort of just headhunted in that fight, which wasn't smart. But I do believe that it's going to be a whole lot easier to hit Gene Silva. And I also think just fighting at range against a guy like Gene Silva is going to be pretty easy for Charles Jourdain. And he has a good enough chin, high enough output, solid kicks, spinning kicks, kicks on the outside, leg kicks, to where I think that he's going to be able to survive, not get put away, and just win a decision based on output alone. All right? Because yes, Gene Silva looked phenomenal in his last fight, but it was against a memeable opponent. And I just need to see him beat someone that's actually solid in order for me to pick him to beat a proven high output striker with a good chin like Charles Jourdain, who may not be worthy of being ranked, but he's definitely like one of the better strikers outside of the rankings. So right now, I'm going to err on the side of caution, no pun intended, for Charles Jourdain, Jourdain. I'm going to pick him by decision. Let's get on to the next one. Cub Swanson versus Andrei Fili. I'm going to pick Andrei Fili. I just watched the Embedded episode, and man, it's going to suck to see Cub Swanson lose because, it was one of the most wholesome things seeing Cub Swanson and all his kids all wearing glasses. They all look identical to him, all blind as a bat. I want him to win. It'd be a feel-good moment to see him win, but I just don't think he's going to get it done, man. He didn't even win his last fight, right? He got outstruck by Hakeem Dawodu, got his hand raised, but it was such a bad robbery, even the announcers, who rarely ever call out robberies, they usually do a good job of biting their tongue and being company men, trying not to stir the pot on a live broadcast. Even the announcers, I think it was maybe Bisbing and I think it was, what's his name, Paul Felder, they were calling it out. They were discussing how it was a pretty bad decision on the live stream. And yeah, it was a pretty blatant robbery. And the thing is, I just think Andrei Fili is a trickier striker than Hakeem Dawodu. Andrei Fili, yeah, he's coming off of a brutal KO loss to Dan Ige, but Dan Ige is elite. Dan Ige is a proven ranked fighter. And Cub Swanson, 40 years old, 41 years old, shouldn't have even won his last fight against Hakeem Dawodu, who doesn't really have the craziest output. Andrei Fili can match him on output, but Andrei Fili can capitalize on the things that Hakeem Dawodu couldn't even capitalize off of, right? And I'm talking about long, rangy kicks. We've seen Cub Swanson get body kick TKO'd by Giga Chikadze. We've seen him get leg kick TKO'd by Jonathan Martinez. Fair enough, those guys have better kicks than him, but I do believe that Andrei Fili, with a serious reach and range advantage, is going to be able to chip away and easily find success with those kicks. And also, Cub Swanson was so open to a long, straight shot right down the pipe in that Hakeem Dawodu fight, but Dawodu is sort of short, sort of stocky, and I don't think he was able to take advantage of it, but there was that same picture over and over and over again of Cub Swanson during their exchanges or at the end of them, sort of dropping his hands, leaning his head back, extremely open on the feet. A similar picture that we saw with Andrei Fili knocking out Lucas Almeida, and I think that Andrei Fili is going to have that open for him during this fight. I actually think he's going to knock Cub Swanson out. On to the next one, Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Now, I'm a little bit concerned for Marc-Andre Barriault in this one, and I'll tell you why. Marc-Andre Barriault has a style where he literally goes head first, locks horns with his opponents, and just slugs in the pocket, slugs in the Diddy boxing range, and he'll do that all night, right? He just buries his head into people's chests and just frickin' throws uppercuts and hooks and uppercuts and hooks. He has one of those styles where you don't even know who's winning the fight at times because, both guys are throwing so many strikes, but they're smothering each other and they clinch so much that you can't even see what's landing and what's not. There's so many strikes that you can't even keep count. I mean, Chris Curtis beat him in his last outing, but it was razor close. I mean, who really cares about who won that fight? That's what Marc-Andre Barriault is going to do. He's going to go out there and he's going to try to frickin' stick his head into Joe Pyfer's chest and try to sort of out-grit him. The issue is, I don't think it's possible to out-grit Joe Pyfer. You know what I mean? Joe Pyfer is going to have a guy that's coming forward the entire time, unlike Jack Hermansson, who utilized his footwork, had a lot of good lateral movement, had a really solid high fight IQ approach not to let his hands go early and to wait for the later half of that fight. And Joe Pyfer lost his last fight. Yeah, it was a bit of a fraud check. Yeah, he got his ass whooped on the ground in the last round. And yeah, he got outboxed, but he did win the first 2 rounds against Jack Hermansson. And that was the best Jack Hermansson that we've ever seen. This is a step down in competition. And this is a guy that's not going to make himself tricky to find. He's marching right down into Joe Pyfer's real house. And Joe Pyfer is going to have the ability to send this guy's head into orbit. And there's a whole lot of sting behind Joe Pyfer's punches. There's a whole lot of salt. And this is the thing. Joe Pyfer, coming off of a loss versus Marc-Andre Barriault with his head right in uppercut range. I'm honestly concerned for the guy. Because this is, let's not forget, Joe Pyfer broke a punch record on the punch machine. And he's coming off of a loss, as we said. Now, yes, I think Marc-Andre Barriault is the second best fighter that we've ever seen Joe Pyfer fight. And that is something that, he's pretty tough too. He's got a good chin. And even though Joe Pyfer is talked about as being the strongest and the most powerful UFC fighter sometimes, I mean, he's not knocking everyone out, let's be honest. Landed some great shots on Abdul Razak Al Hassan, didn't put him out. But listen, there's a different level of grit with every single Joe Pyfer punch. And I just think that he's going to go in there, and he doesn't have the deepest tool bag, and I think that was his issue against Jack Hermansson. He has a big thudding right hand and a big nasty uppercut. He's got a big powerful jab, not super high output. He's got some big low kicks, and he's got a blast double leg takedown. He has a pretty basic skill set, but the thing is, I just think everything that he does is solid enough to be able to hit a guy that's as hittable as Marc-Andre Barriault, right? you got a big thudding right hand, and you got some grit on it, Jack Hermansson's going to be sticking and moving and pop shotting at range. It's hard to find that guy. He's got his guard up. He's seeing everything coming. Marc-Andre Barriault is going to be waltzing right into range. I think Joe is going to knock this dude out. And if he doesn't KO him, I think he's going to take him down. And Marc-Andre Barriault has been finished on the ground before. Okay, and Joe Pyfer's been getting in a lot of work with his teammate and good friend, Tom Brady. Freaking Sean Brady, dude. So I think Joe Pyfer's going to knock him out. Uppercut, first or second round, with a furious flurry afterwards. And I think he's going to get on that mic, and I think he's going to wreak havoc, is Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer Fight Week, guys. Get ready and prepare yourselves. He's coming in hot. Ian Machado Garry versus Michael Venom Page. I think Ian Garry's going to beat Michael Venom Page, and I think he's actually going to make this look pretty easy. Okay? Ian Garry is a real smart fighter, all right? And you do have to give him some respect, because the last fight he got a lot of criticism for, but I actually remember that it was Jeff Neal that was making that fight shit. Ian Garry, the only moment in that fight with Jeff Neal where people had any reason to critique him was in the third round, where he was a couple minutes away from winning and he was doing a whole lot of circling around, and it sort of looked like he was on his bike running away from him a little bit. But every now and then Jeff Neal would just rush into the clinch, and it seemed like he was trying to sort of convince the judges that he was doing something, that he was trying to rack up control time in hopes that they would just give him each round based on landing a punch before he gets to the clinch and racking up control time. Michael Page is not going to do that. So we're going to see more striking with Ian Garry, which is going to be more risky with a fast sniper like Michael Page. But Ian Garry still looked pretty good. He's got a solid jab. He has really good step-in knees that he was landing on Jeff Neal when he was crashing in. And I just think he's got such a wide variety of strikes. He's got such good timing and such good footwork that it's going to be 10 times harder for Michael Page to hit Ian Garry as it was for Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland, in that fight, was doing a whole lot of nothing on the feet outside of the first couple of minutes. I'm telling you, Kevin Holland was right in front of him, hands down, lethargic, not a care in the world, unmotivated Kevin Holland just sitting there waiting for Michael Page to throw overhands and right hands crashing in. Ian Garry is going to be moving around on his bike. He's going to be jabbing, and he's actually going to be throwing kicks with great output. And I think that Michael Page sort of relies on these big moments. He sort of relies on a big knockdown or a big KO. And I do think he has a chance to KO Ian Garry in this fight, or he has a chance to win this fight with a couple of knockdowns. I just think that Garry is actually going to mix in the takedowns, and I think he's going to have such good footwork that he's not going to be in range for Michael Page to be able to set those things up. And he's going to be working a whole lot in between Michael Page's flurries. All right, so I think Garry's going to win this fight based on output. I think he's going to be chopping at the legs of Michael Page, who also has good leg kicks, but just doesn't throw them with as much volume. And I think Garry's going to be, when he's in front of Michael Page before Michael Page throws his big overhand blitz, I think Garry's going to be popping him on the nose with a stiff jab. I think he's going to be digging to the body with a front kick up the middle. And I think he's going to be circling and circling whenever Michael Page explodes and tries to catch him with a big overhand or a big spinning elbow or whatnot. I just think Garry's really slick with his footwork. I think he's going to toss his ego to the wayside and even try to take Michael Page down at some point in this fight. And, we talk about the grappling of Kevin Holland and how he's got a couple submissions in the UFC, and he wasn't able to really do anything to Michael Page. Came pretty close to a submission. I don't think Garry's going to do better than Holland on the ground, although, maybe we'll be surprised. There's just not a lot of tape on Ian Garry's submission game. There's not a lot of tape on him doing anything like that in the UFC, but I do think he is going to be able to take down Michael Page at least once in this fight to bank a round. And as I said, if Michael Page does knock him out, I think Garry wins a pretty easy decision based on output. Yeah, I just think it's going to be hard for Michael Page to get Ian Garry to set his feet for long enough and to sort of have a lazy guard. Kevin Holland was lazy in that fight, and I don't think Kevin Holland's anywhere near the level of Ian Garry anyway. I don't think he's got the same timing. I don't think he's got the same fight IQ. I don't think he's got the same speed. I don't think he's got the same shot selection. His technique is sloppier too. He doesn't have a great jab. Ian Garry, I mean, Kevin Holland looks goofy as hell. Everything Ian Garry does is by the book. And yeah, he's a little bit open to hooks, but that's not Michael Venom Page's best technique. Michael Venom Page's best techniques are the flying knees, right? Maybe they're the right hands or the overhands and the elbows and whatnot, but I just don't think Ian Garry is going to be there for him to hit all that often. So I'm going with Garry. Michael Page has a decent chance to land some knockdowns, maybe even to get a big KO. If anyone can do it to Ian Garry right now, it is Michael Page, who's extremely fast, even at the age of 37. This is not an age thing. This is not why I'm picking Ian Garry. I just think he has a great style to outstrike Michael Page, and he is objectively the best striker Michael Page has ever fought. All right? Kind of reminds me of the Wonder Boy Ian Garry matchup, though. Like, Michael Page could just be one of those guys like Wonder Boy Thompson that no one's ever really going to comfortably outstrike because he's too tricky, and maybe we'll find out on the night that you can't just outpoint him. Like, you got to knock this dude out in order to beat him. He's just simply that good, and he's never going to be there for you to kick and hit consistently. But I think if anyone's capable of doing it, it's Garry with his solid output. And again, great kicks, roundhouse kicks, front kicks, an amazing jab. He's got a good ability to stay at a safe range and to move his feet. Let's get on to the next one. Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze. I'm thinking of doing a dark room for this one, a Dan Hardy dark room style breakdown. Let me know if you guys would be interested. We got to really get into the weeds on this one. This is a tricky one because Roman Dolidze is moving up from middleweight, and he's going to have that middleweight skill advantage. Now, the thing is, on the feet, Roman Dolidze is sort of known as a shitty striker, right? He got outstruck by Marvin Vettori, who is literally known for being mediocre on the feet, who can't make adjustments worth a damn. And this guy really just has a big Ophi right hand. That's all he's got, a big Ophi right hand. Now, it just so happens that Anthony Smith is sort of open to right hands because I've seen this recently in his fights, but Anthony Smith is constantly spamming this lead hook when his opponents come crashing in. And it's a looping lead hook, and I could see Roman Dolidze where maybe he can't land it on someone as fast as a Mavov. Maybe he could land it on Anthony Smith. And early on, Roman does have some pop in his hands. But I think that Smith, I got to give him some credit. He is crafty enough and sort of a smart enough fighter to bide his time early. He warms into fights. He's sort of one of these guys that snowballs as the fight progresses, or sometimes it either snowballs or he comes crashing down because his body starts to break and fold up, and people can start to kind of, whoop his ass a little bit. And Roman Dolidze also has decent leg kicks. And I think it's going to be quite evident that Roman Dolidze isn't going to do as bad as a lot of people expect early on. Because again, yes, he's having a hard time dealing with Nasruddin Imavov, but that's a solid middleweight striker. Nasruddin Imavov is one of the few solid middleweight strikers. And light heavyweight, I mean, especially Anthony Smith, the light heavyweight, he's a little bit plotty. He's nowhere near as slick as Imavov, and his footwork is nowhere near as good either. He's a lot easier to hit. Okay? And Roman Dolidze got outstruck by Jack Hermanson, but Jack Hermanson, look at what he just did to Joe Pyfer, right? Joe Pyfer's a much better striker than Anthony Smith, or at least maybe not a much better striker, but he's a lot faster. He's a lot more dynamic. Jack Hermanson was easily schooling Roman Dolidze on the feet. And he got destroyed on the ground, but that's because he was taking Roman Dolidze to the ground. I don't think Anthony Smith is going to make it a point to take Roman Dolidze to the ground because, and I just saw the embedded episode 1, and I see Anthony Smith is doing some grappling, which is good. He's doing grappling with Cody Brundage, which is a little bit worrisome, but he's doing grappling nonetheless. He knows what he's getting into. He knows that Roman Dolidze is best down there. He's going to make it a point to stand on his feet. I guess what I'm saying is, this is a big step down in Roman Dolidze when it comes to striking skill, right? And his fight with Vettori was kind of close. Like, Vettori beat him, but, Marvin Vettori might be mid at middleweight, but is he going to be mid in front of Anthony Smith, who's sort of known as, one of the less dynamic fighters at light heavyweight? Now, Anthony Smith does have decent fight IQ, right? But his athleticism is not all there. This is a tough one to pick because I could see Roman Dolidze, who doesn't necessarily have the best ability to take people down. I could see a little bit of that middleweight slickness where he's in there with a guy that's a little bit slower, a little bit plottier like Anthony Smith, and he's able to get him down. And I do think that Roman Dolidze is the better grappler. I think he's a lot more impressive on the ground. He has better submissions. I mean, if you're putting away Jack Hermanson like that, that's incredibly impressive. Yes, Anthony Smith just had a guillotine win over Petrino, but Petrino literally just freaking flung himself into that. So I sort of gifted that to Anthony Smith. Roman Dolidze's not getting caught in a guillotine. Dolidze has a good chance to finish this fight on the ground. And it will be close on the feet is what I'm saying, because he's used to fighting a lot faster, slicker strikers. And you're going to see that there's a difference between Imavov and Hermanson and Anthony Smith early on. But I'm starting to feel the momentum. There's something in the air with Anthony Smith, and this is who I'm ultimately picking. Something in the air with Anthony Smith. And I think he's sort of gaining his confidence, and I like this new mindset that he has of no longer chasing after the belt. Anthony Smith, for a long time, he's been saying, was always focused on what's the fastest way for me to get back to the belt. I need to win the belt. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that he's always hanging out with ex-champions like Michael Bisping on the Believe You Me podcast and Rashad Evans and all that. It's good that he no longer cares about that belt. But I think that now he's just sort of enjoying the process of getting ready for fights and showing his best, and that's all he really wants to do. And he's been saying that he's been in really good shape for this one. He talked about how he didn't even train once from the moment he fought Ryan Spann to the moment he fought Khalil Roundtree and took that fight on short notice. And how, even though that was a bit extreme for him, usually he does take a lot of time off. But after that Vitor Petrino fight, he's been staying in the gym, he's been training, and he was doing a lot of work with Jamal Hill. He was getting ready for an even slicker striker like Carlos Olberg when Jamal Hill pulled out. And I think that Anthony Smith, who's been doing a lot of reps in the gym with the basics, you know, he's been saying that back in the day he sort of neglected the basics because a lot of fighters can rest on their laurels and get to the point to where I don't really need to lock in and focus so much when we're just training takedown defense up against the cage, or we're just focusing on training the jab or very basic techniques. And now Anthony Smith says that he's fully locked in the gym. He's obsessed with getting better. And I think that Roman Dolidze, not great wrestling, not a great ability to take fights to the ground with a high rate of success. I think Anthony Smith, if he can keep this fight standing, he's going to have the range advantage on the feet. I think he's going to be able to kick Roman Dolidze to the body, which seems to be a bit of a soft point for Roman Dolidze. And Roman Dolidze, outside of the kicks, which could be an issue for Anthony Smith, is not really offering a whole lot else other than a big oafy right hand. And you know, ultimately, I think I kind of made a good argument for why you might want to take Roman Dolidze, but he is taking this on a week's notice. And Anthony Smith has known about fighting on this card for the past 3 weeks, it seems, right? And even before that, he was in the gym, training, staying healthy. And I'm sure Roman Dolidze's been training, but I think Anthony Smith is going to get this one done. I think he has a lot of momentum. I think he's in a great place mentally, and I think he's going to edge out this fight via decision, okay? I don't think he's going to put Roman Dolidze away, but I think he's going to win a bit of a close, sloppy decision. I'll maybe do a breakdown on this fight. We need to really get into the weeds and do the tail of the tape, Dan Hardy room style, but either way, let's get on to the next one. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. I'm going to pick Diego Lopes to knock out Brian Ortega in the first round brutally. Okay, I think he's going to brutally KO him with an uppercut. Diego Lopes has astonishing power, right? He's not knocking out people with the cleanest shots you could imagine, or he's not really winding up with these shots. I mean, he's literally dropping Sadiq Yusuff with like mini uppercuts in the clinch, and he's knocking out Pat Sabatini off the break of the clinch with a bit of an arm punch. This guy's power is ridiculous. He's also a huge featherweight, and Brian Ortega has underrated grappling. I do think he's going to have the ability to maybe get a body lock takedown or a trip up against the fence, but like Diego Lopes early on is going to be stronger than him. He's fast twitch. Ortega's a little bit of a slow twitch guy, and I think he's going to be able to shuck Ortega off of him if Ortega runs at him and tries to take him down. And I just think that Diego's so dangerous in close quarters, and he's so much faster than Brian Ortega at range early, that there's going to be a massive speed discrepancy and power discrepancy early on. And I think that, you know, we saw Brian Ortega get knocked down twice against Yair Rodriguez. And Yair's really skilled and he's fast, but Diego's even more powerful. And I think that seeing Brian Ortega get dropped twice, that sort of shows me that the damage is starting to pile up for the guy a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he's taken a shitload of damage throughout his career. He's had this ability to just kind of zombie forward and accept punishment and just figure out a way to win in the later rounds of a war. And that's possible. I think it's possible that he can survive early and get Diego Lopes into deep waters in the third round and maybe finish him via TKO or maybe get him out on the ground. That's definitely possible, but I just think that Diego Lopes is so good early on, so fast and powerful, that he is going to catch Brian Ortega in close quarters with maybe an uppercut, or maybe he's going to catch him at range with a right hand. And here's the difference between Yair Rodriguez and Diego Lopes, and we all know it. It's that if Diego Lopes drops Brian Ortega, he's got phenomenal jiu-jitsu, and he's incredibly aggressive on the ground as well. Great ground and pound strikes, powerful ground and pound strikes. We saw that against Pat Sabatini. We saw that against Sadiq Youssef. And even if he doesn't put Ortega out cold, I just think that if the ref sees him get dropped badly and Diego jumps on him and starts hammer fisting him, and Ortega's working his way back, slow and plotty like, and Diego Lopes gets the back and starts pounding him into the canvas and has him flattened on the ground, I think that the ref is going to stop the fight. Okay? Maybe we even see Diego Lopes choke him out in the first. My point is, I think that we're going to see a big moment like that early. And I think Lopes is going to be the only guy outside of Alexander Volkanovski to be able to jump on Brian Ortega on the ground and beat him up without having to really fear what's coming back in his direction, especially if Ortega's rocked. And even more so than Volkanovski, Diego Lopes has a submission game. And he's even more powerful, right? Volk was like close to TKOing Brian Ortega on the ground, but he didn't drop him first. Diego Lopes, I think, will have a decent chance to do that. And here's the thing. Even if Brian Ortega gets Diego down early, I think that Diego Lopes is one of the few guys that can play the jiu-jitsu game. Volkanovski didn't. He sort of did a good job of stacking the guard and not sort of getting in super close range when it came to the grappling and not engaging in the jiu-jitsu and sort of just keeping like heavy top pressure. I think Diego Lopes will be able to play that game with Brian Ortega. At least he'll be able to stay safe. I just think Diego's going to win this. Like, maybe this gets to deep waters. Maybe Diego tires out a little bit, because this is on short notice and Ortega does have pretty good cardio. He has great cardio, actually. And we know what happened the last time Diego Lopes took a short notice fight. He sort of gassed out against Evloev, started getting beat up on the ground a little bit, backed up on the feet. And Ortega, he does have power in his hands as well, decent boxing. He's going to be able to put combinations together as this fight goes on. Maybe he could start to outpoint Diego and start to outdamage him and maybe take him down and slow him down a little bit. But I just think early on, we're going to see that big moment where Diego catches him with an uppercut and puts him away, and the ref steps in. It's going to be a ground and pound finish from Diego Lopes. Let's get on to the next one. Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka. I'm picking Alex Pereira to knock Jiri Prochazka out in the first round. I think he's going to KO him early. Now, yes, Jiri could grapple. I don't think he's going to. He might, but again, you got to ask yourself, like, is he going to be able to get the finish on the ground? Probably not. The last time he took Alex Pereira down in the first fight, which he actually did well in, he did really well against Alex Pereira and was winning the majority of that fight, aside from the leg kicks. I mean, outside of that, Pereira wasn't really doing a whole lot, just sort of leg kicking, but Jiri was landing combos. Jiri took him down early and kept him on the ground. But the thing is, Pereira is so calm off of his back, and he does such a good job of like trapping the wrists with his oven mitt-sized hands that I just think it's going to be pretty easy for him to nullify the ground game of Jiri Prochazka, who, if he doesn't have someone hurt first, he's not necessarily the highest level grappler with the highest level ground and pound, even though he did finish Rakic on the ground. So I don't think Jiri is going to be looking at that and saying to himself, yeah, we got to take him down and dominate him this way. I think Jiri is going to look at the success that he had on the feet, and I think he's going to try to pick his shots and knock Alex Pereira out, because if he can land the right shot, of course, he can KO Pereira. And I think the longer this fight goes, the more that favors Jiri. Even though Pereira's leg kicks are going to add up a lot over the course of the rounds, it's just one of those things where if you don't put Jiri out cold, he's eventually going to find one of those nasty shots. And this time, it's not Glover Teixeira who's level changing every few minutes that's going to disrupt the rhythm. Like, Pereira is going to have a hard time disrupting the rhythm of Jiri Prochazka for 5 rounds straight to where, he evades that KO shot. But Jiri is so open on the feet. And yes, he proved that once again, if you don't put him out cold, there's that holy martial arts spirit willing him to victory. And we saw that in the Rakic fight. How he didn't get KO'd is beyond me. The guy's chin is made out of granite. But Pereira's the one guy that can catch him. And man, he was getting lit up so much. And it's not even that he was getting touched up with 1-2s. Even outside of the moments where he was getting touched up with 1-2s, there were so many moments in that fight with Alexander Rakic where Yuri's hands are down and he's super open to getting cleaned out by a left hook by Alex Pereira. Yuri's going to be putting tons of pressure on Pereira. And I just think that early on, he's a little bit flimsy. He's a little bit goofy. Early on, we saw last time he was throwing these little flimsy body kicks and these little flimsy head kicks with no sting on them. It's going to be hard to head kick Alex Pereira, too. It's the boxing of Jiri Prochazka that's going to win him this fight. And I just don't think it's good enough for me to bank on it. Like, he's so open. Yes, he has a granite chin. But if anyone can put him away, it is Alex Pereira. The power this guy carries is insane. And I think Pereira is even better than he was when he fought Jiri last time. He's looking more confident in his ability to put people away, and he's starting to finish fights earlier and earlier. We saw him sort of have a minute to sort of gauge himself and gauge the distance and sort of get his timing in the Jamal Hill fight. A minute into that fight, he starts stalking him down, eventually makes the read, and thrusts himself into that left hook. Whereas in the last fight, he was sort of on the back foot, put Jiri down on the back foot up against the cage and countered him. Early stoppage. That fight definitely shouldn't have been stopped. One of the worst stoppages in UFC history. I hope Marc Goddard is not in the cage because that would completely ruin it if we see one knockdown. You know how Marc Goddard is. If it's a prelim fight, let him go out on their shields. If it's a main event championship fight where, it's one of the most important fights of the year, Marc Goddard's going to step in and ruin it all. Let's hope he's not in the cage. That was a horrible stoppage. We don't know what would have happened. I'm not even going to be one of these guys that errs on the side of, Jiri probably wouldn't have survived. We don't know. That's how you know it's an early stoppage. We don't know what would have happened, especially with a guy like Jiri. If Marc Goddard is in Las Vegas, someone has to let him know. And that's the thing. I don't mean to make this about Goddard, but he's so unbelievably stubborn that unless it's like Dana White or one of his authorities, if it's just someone that's a fan or just an analyst or whatever, if someone's not above him when it comes to authority in the UFC, he's not even going to listen, even though if what we're telling him is logical. He's got such a big ego on him. So he could fuck this up completely. But I think that this time, Alex Pereira is going to hunt Jiri a little bit. Okay, Yuri's going to have that goofy style. He's going to be hard to read. But man, he's got his chin and he's around all over the place and he's bouncing around. His hands are down. I think Pereira's going to shovel left hook this motherfucker. And I think he's going to put him out cold in the first round. That's my prediction. Pereira with extra power, with extra mass, because he seems to be getting bigger from fight to fight. He was enormous against Jamal Hill. He's getting bigger from fight to fight. He's easing into this weight class more and more. And I'm liking the confidence of Alex Pereira. Now, there is a worry that Jiri Prochazka, because he's going to have a much easier weight cut, which is kind of crazy because he also is a pretty big light heavyweight. He's massive as well, but apparently he doesn't walk around that heavy. I guess he just doesn't carry a lot of weight in his legs. Jiri Prochazka is going to have a pretty easy weight cut. Apparently he walks around very close to 205, maybe like 210 pounds. Pereira's going to have to cut 22 on short notice. He's been flying around the world, doing seminars in Australia, going on these like 15, 20-hour flights. That can't be good for him. Okay? That can't be great for him. Whereas Jiri Prochazka has been locking in the Czech Republic, in the forest. He's shredded. He's ready to go. He's going to ease into this weight cut. He's already mentally sound. He's done the 3 weeks in the cabin in the darkness. He knows what he's fighting for. He has the purpose. But I think he's so open. He's so bad defensively, dude. And that's why he's so fun to watch. And again, he could easily win this fight. At any moment, Jiri Prochazka can catch Alex Pereira and put him away. I just think he's a little bit clunky early on. And Jiri sort of freaking tests the waters by getting hit by people. He's going to go in there and try to test the waters, just sort of feel the power. That's probably Yuri's game plan. I'm going to feel the power of the left hook this time. Sort of see where I need to be the next time I take that shot on the chin. I think he's not going to be able to get past the first solid one. I think Pereira's going to leap into a left hook early on when Yuri has his hands down. I think Yuri's maybe going to like throw a leg kick, okay? He's going to throw a head kick or something like that. He's going to be off balance throwing one of these flimsy kicks early, and I think Pereira's instantly going to jump on him with that left hook, put him down. Maybe if he's not out cold, he'll have a couple of hammer fists to greet him when he wakes up, like Jamal Hill did, and maybe that'll be the end of it. But I'm going with Pereira, early KO. Now, I don't think the leg kicks are going to be an issue, which is why I keep saying Yuri, the longer this fight goes on, the better it is for him. Like, everyone talks about the leg kicks, Pereira. Yes, they're damaging, but not for Yuri, bro. Not for Yuri. He was getting heated up in that second round. He's one of these guys where he'll be getting caught. He'll be getting cobbled all over the place. His legs will be looking like they're on thin ice at the end of the first, and then he'll be out there in the fourth, mowing people down. The leg kicks aren't going to end Jiri Prochazka. It's just going to give him different looks, I think. Yuri's one of those guys where he's so tough, I don't think he's going to get debilitated by those kicks. He did get dropped in the first fight by one of them, but I don't think it's going to give him a whole lot of issue. He's not getting finished by kicks. He's not going to be deterred at all right? And he can fight out of either stance. You know what I mean? It's going to be a hard one for Pereira, but I do trust in his ability to catch Jiri Prochazka with his hands low. This time, it won't be a counter. It'll be like, maybe it'll be a bit of a counter of a kick early. First round KO for Alex Pereira. Okay? And he'll move up the GOAT list even more. If Jiri wins, I'll be happy because he's one of my favorite fighters ever, but so is Pereira. So whoever wins, I'll be fine with. I'll be gutted for the guy that loses, though. Hope you guys enjoyed. That is it for my predictions. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time.